Paul Lamantia. Paul Christopher Lamantia, born 1938, is an American visual artist known for paintings and drawings that explored dark psychosexual imagery. He studied at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago and emerged in the 1960s and 1970s as part of the larger group of artists known as the Chicago Imagists. Lamantia often depicts surreal, distorted figures in transgressive scenarios, rendered in a formally structured, dizzying patterns, line and high-key color. He has been influenced by Expressionism, High Renaissance and Baroque art, and psychoanalytic theory. Art historian Robert Cozzolino suggests his work imply multiple levels of meaning, allegories of lust, confessional hallucinations about sexual anxiety, visions from an altered state. Critic Dennis Adrian called him a Chicago maverick whose work challenges and wrenches the limits of acceptability and taste, while Franz Schulze described him as one of the city's most brutal and coldly expressionist figurative artists. Lamantia attracted early attention from artist Jean Dubuffet and has been recognized with retrospectives at the Koehnline Museum of Art 2016, Loyola University 2002, and the Hyde Park Art Center 1982, and reviews in national art publications and major newspapers. His work has been shown at the Art Institute of Chicago and Museum of Contemporary Art, Chicago, and sits in their permanent collections, as well as those of the Smithsonian American Art Museum and Milwaukee Art Museum, among many. Lamantia lives and works in Chicago. Life and career. Lamantia was born Walter Zamek in Chicago, Illinois in 1938, and adopted by Joseph and Nellie Lamantia at age 1. His early visual education included underground comics, museum trips with his mother, his father's collection of 1940s softcore porn and girly culture novelties, and a 14-week scholarship he won to study drawing at the Art Institute of Chicago. He met and studied under mechanical illustrator Jules Zinni as a teenager, intending to become a commercial artist. Between 1957–9, he attended the American Academy of Art in Chicago, learning figure drawing from artist-illustrator William Mosby, and worked as an advertising graphic designer before enlisting in the U.S. Army Reserves in 1960. In the service, his talent for caricature came to light, and he painted 16 murals at Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, and Fort Riley, Kansas. After his service, Lamantia took night classes at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago SAIC and resumed advertising work, but soon elected to pursue a fine art career. He enrolled at SAIC to study with professors Ray Yoshida and Whitney Halstead, and was a contemporary of many of the Chicago Imagists. Lamantia exhibited in key shows at the city's key poles of artistic influence, the Art Institute of Chicago, Chicago and Vicinity 1962, 1964, 1965, and the Illinois Institute of Technology, the Sunken City Rises 1964, Phalanx 1965. In 1964, after taking additional education courses at the University of Chicago, he earned a BFA, followed by an MFA in 1968. During this time, he discovered Dr. Hans Prinjorn's 1922 book, Artistry of the Mentally Ill, a key influence on Jean Dubuffet's art brut. Lamantia became known for his complex, obsessive drawings through group exhibitions at the Hyde Park Art Center, Museum of Contemporary Art, Chicago MCA, and Art Institute. In 1972, Jean Dubuffet took notice of Lamantia's work, eventually exchanging work with him and hosting him in Paris. In subsequent years, Lamantia showed in regular solo exhibitions at Zach's Gallery 1977–2000 and was featured in prominent shows at the American Academy of Arts and Letters 1975, School of the Art Institute Visions 1976, Crocker Art Museum, The Chicago Connection 1976-7, Traveling Smithsonian Institution Chicago Currents 1979-80, Traveling Artists Space New York Recent Art. In addition to his art career, Lamantia taught art in Chicago Public Schools CPS from 1966 to 1993. After retiring from CPS, he continued to teach workshops and courses and lecture at institutions including SAIC, Columbia College, International Academy of Design and Technology, Loyola University, Harry S. Truman College, the Art Academy of Cincinnati, and Cincinnati Art Museum. His art continues to be informed by travels he and his wife, Cheryl R. Johnson, have undertaken to 34 countries including China, Egypt, Hong Kong, India, Mexico, Nepal, Russia, Thailand, Tibet, Turkey, and many throughout Europe. Work. Critical consensus on Lamantia's art coalesces around four aspects. It's 1. High-voltage emotional impact, 2. Pushing of form and subject matter to aesthetic and psychological extremes, 3. Meticulous, bravura technique, and 4. Outsider status, just beyond mainstream acceptance and existing critical categories. In 1972, Dennis Adrian described it as harsh and hysterical and profoundly shocking. 4 decades later, Margaret Hawkins called it manic, roiling, chaotic, terrifying, and maybe terrified work that seethes with sticky, undiluted ID. Lamantia's work reflects a voracious consumption of art history, drawing inspiration from expressionist and surrealist automatism, masters such as Titian and Rubens, Art Brut, outsider art and cubism, the Chicago Monster Roster School and Peter Saul, comic artists Robert Crumb and Basil Wolverton, as well as Freudian and Jungian theories of the unconscious. In terms of chronology and psychology, critics write that he hovers at the edge of the Chicago Imagists, sharing themes of sex, aggression, and psychological menace and a tendency towards vernacular expression. In the historical volume, Art in Chicago 2018, curator Robert Cozzolino suggests his peripherality, as with Chicagoans Linda Kramer and Robert Lostutter, results partly from not exhibiting under the Harry, who wore similar banners, but mainly from his more thematically startling and ferocious depictions of socially transgressive sexuality. Critics Peter Frank and Hawkins concur, describing his work as rawer than the Imagists, the cartooniness a rapper for something scarier, less aesthetic and polite. Writer-gallerist John Corbett identified Lamantia as a psychosexual outlaw, making utterly original work with one foot inside and one outside the Imagist camp. Painting. Lamantia first gained notoriety in the 1960s for his unfiltered, high-energy drawings. By the early 1970s, critics suggested that his more controlled and deliberately composed paintings had caught up in terms of freedom of invention and integration of feeling and execution. In monumental works, he depicted surreal, ambiguously sexed figures and groups, sirens, buxom temptresses, leather-clad dominatrixes, voyeurs, and mutant beasts undergoing dizzying transformations into giant insects, plant-like forms, and horrific organic conglomerations, while engaged in discomfiting, sometimes predatory sexual dramas. In these paintings, faces, skin, sinuous legs, torpedo breasts, muscles and organs blend or morph into invented anatomies of snapping jaws, sprouting eyes, bird beaks, claws, tentacles, and machine, while skin, makeup, masking, tattooing, scarring, and costuming become indistinguishable, rendering interpretation compellingly ambiguous for many critics. In works such as Cancellation 1974-5 and Night Language 2 1977, Lamantia set his scenes in garish, compressed domestic interiors that recall the harrowing rooms of Francis Bacon and Max Beckmann. Critics described the work as a tangle of bewildering abstract patterns, high-key color, frenzied line, and strong contour, with contradictory forms that lacked a focal point or orientation to distinguish figure from ground. Simultaneously, they noted a clear level of formal structural integrity deriving from what Franz Schulze called Lamantia's controlled wildness and his absorption of classical genre compositions of female nudes in interiors from Titian to Matisse. In the 1980s, critics observed that Lamantia's paintings, while thematically as unnerving as ever, became leaner, more painterly and open, and reminiscent of Willem de Kooning's Savage Woman paintings. Works from Whisper 1980 to Blood Love 1993 featured a subdued, finessed palette of whites, light yellows, pastels, and deep purples that enhanced the rhythms of streamlined, Baroque compositions employing illusionistic, theatrical space. Alan Artner compared the technique to Bacon's appropriation of Monet-like painterliness in his disquieting works. Buzz Spector felt this joy in painting offset a potentially moralistic tone in the work. Lamantia's figuration also evolved towards an H.P. Lovecraftian, sci-fi-like mechanomorphism, with metallic musculature suggesting malevolent sexual machinery merging with his existing regrafted mutations. Lamantia's paintings from the later 1990s onward returned to the more claustrophobic compositions of earlier work, incorporating the linear freedom of his drawings, but in a less manic and tortured form that critics described as an amiable kind of chaos. James Ude called the work a strangely hypnotic catalogue of unmediated male desire immersed in sheer pictorial thrill. He suggested that Lamantia's uncensored, possibly confessional frankness about contradictory aspects of desire in works such as Still Lives 1995 elevated what might seem retrograde or misogynist, much like Picasso's 1920s-1930s work. Late paintings, such as The Solution 2010 or The Collector of Unfulfilled Dreams 2012, Lamantia's unnerving reworking of the Garden of Eden story, feature a greater emphasis on the materiality of paint, the expressive possibilities of gestural accident, and flirtation with abstraction. Drawing. In the 1960s, Lamantia attracted notice for drawings packed with sprawling comic and Miro-like forms and explosive energy that some compared to the fantasy-scapes of Roberto Matta or Hieronymus Bosch. Working in ballpoint and felt tip pen, pastel, wash, collage, color pencil, and crayons, he produced frenzied, intricate work that was unstable in its emotion and forms, and suggested a spontaneity that critics said was belied by its technical richness and finesse. Robert Cozzolino called works of the time, such as Like Father Like Son 1968, extraordinarily raw and vulnerable treatments of family, identity, and emotional states that portrayed the angst of the period, and it's the personal is the political ethos. Critics hold that the drawings, while thematically similar, are neither tangential nor mere studies, but autonomous, open-ended works that explore oniric, metaphysical, and visionary pursuits with a searing, concentrated energy. Cozzolino and others consider the drawings to be among the least well-known, understudied bodies of work among artists of Lamantia's generation. John Corbett, nonetheless, suggests that this work built a historical bridge between the rough-hewn feel of earlier monster roster artists and the sleek, cartoonish gleam of later Imagist work. Lamantia's drawing has continued apace his painting in subsequent decades, including some monochromatic drawings in the 1970s, such as your favorite Soares bronze plated in raw meat, and the vendor of his Scars Art Institute of Chicago collection, both from 1977. In the catalog to Lamantia's 2016 retrospective, Margaret Hawkins described late drawings, such as Oddball Losers 2000 and Peak Freak 2001, as gorgeous explorations of infinite inner space that flow directly from the subconscious and teem with provocative sensory information since 2014. Lamantia has started painting on frozen pizza boxes, leaving portions of the color food photography to peek through and morph into skin and eyes. These works share. In addition to his drawings, Lamantia has also created prints at Anchor Press in Chicago and Lakeside Press in Michigan. Collections and recognition. Lamantia's works sits in numerous public collections, including the Smithsonian American Art Museum, Art Institute of Chicago, Museum of Contemporary Art. Lamantia was recognized with the Art Institute of Chicago's Logan Prize in 1984.